So coming in to get ready for our first shape, which is going to be butterfly. So either taking something to sit on in the form of cushion or a block. Just come to sit on something so that your pelvis is raised. And slightly tilting forwards. And then take your feet in front of your hips with just sufficient space to fit in a small spaniel, perhaps. She loves this, butterfly. And then lengthen through the spine. Maybe take your hands behind you and just taking a moment to kind of like tuck the flesh on your bum. So sometimes we pull the flesh out as a way. Sometimes it's nice to actually tuck it in a little bit, tuck it under. It just changes the position of the hip here. Lengthen up through your spine, and then we're going to start to come forwards, folding forwards. Not holding on to the feet, so maybe turning the palms of the hands up. And finding some softness in the back of your shoulders. You can let your head be heavy and, you know, just let your chin relax into your chest. And allow your breath to settle, so being effortless in your breath. And just sending a message of ease and softness into your hips. So we're externally rotating our hips right now. So now we think of our body as like a structure, this mechanism that is very complex with all the ligaments and the tendons and the fascia and the bones. So we've got this kind of like framework of our skeleton and our bones that is supported and held together by ligaments and the muscles. So they're kind of like the guy ropes, if you like, that support our skeletons. But whilst we do, you know, largely we pay a lot of attention around strengthening and building flexibility into our muscles, and less so with our joints. So if we can keep our bones strong, it helps to build a lot more of a healthier and a kind of like longer lasting structure. It's rather like a house, like the bricks, you know, looking after the bricks and the mortar. So just finding that place where you can feel that you are almost on the edge of, you know, going, just like this feeling of being on an edge where if you were to go any further, it would be not quite so comfortable. So you're feeling something, but nothing too strong. We don't want to make it too yang here. And just inviting those little areas of softness into the back of the shoulders, the back of your hips, into your jaw. So we're coming into the last minute here. So is there anything else that can be let go of? And this is a feeling of just existing in the shape here. Now the last 3 or 4 breaths here. And then very slowly, when you're ready, making your way to come up. So walking your hands back up. Take your hands behind you. Then carefully close up your legs. Just come off your block and sit flat down here. And then maybe just take your feet wide and let your knees drop in. That might be enough. So you're going to be wanting to do one of two things. You might either like to stay here with the internal rotation as a counter pose, or you might like to just take your legs from side to side. So movement, what do you want? What does your body need today? Do you need to be moving or do you need to be still? So always allowing the kind of like rebound in between shapes, so we don't go straight from one to the other. We give our body a chance to recover because we're working with these less elastic tissues of the body. Bones and ligaments and fascia, they aren't so elastic, so they kind of need a little bit of recovery time before we go into the next shape. And then coming back again, so coming back to sit on whatever you were sitting on, giving yourself a little bit of a lift. We're coming into half shoelace now, so we're going to take the right leg straight out in front and then hug your left knee into your chest. So sit up fairly tall to start with, and then pick up your left leg, cross it over, and then gently bringing your left foot back towards the hip so that you've got knee above knee. And then take your hands by the side. So the further back your foot comes, the kinder this is going to be on your knee. If your hips are really open though, you might be able to kind of like get your shin a little bit more parallel. That's definitely going to make it more hard on the hips, but to make it easier on the hips, curl the leg back. So you've got less, we are still externally rotating the hips. I know that that kind of like feels as though it might be a little bit of a contradiction, but because of the angle of the knee, because of what we're doing with our lower leg, and anatomically, we are externally rotating in the hip. I'll explain in a minute. And then lift up. So lift long through the spine and then begin to come forwards. So beginning to come forwards, walking your hands forwards again. And then relax your head. So you might like to put some cushions between your chest and your leg to support. So possibly, as well as getting external rotation into your left hip, we're also stretching down the back of your straightened leg. So we are stretching, we're flexing at the right hip and externally rotating at your left hip. So lots of planes of movement here going on. Just softening. We're not going to be too long here. We're just working our way around your hip mandala. So as well as being lovely things to look at, mandalas, they do actually have quite a spiritual meaning. So in Buddhist traditions, they are used to kind of like as a representation of the impermanence of life. So everything is the idea of this circle of life that we go through. So from birth all the way through the cycle of growth and into adolescence and the aging process, and then eventually death, when we then return back to the earth, and so the cycle begins and we go through the various levels of life through possibly reincarnation, depending on your beliefs. So this mandala represents this impermanence of life and the circle of life. and the idea that everything does come back to the earth eventually. So softening through the back of the shoulders. Just be here for a little bit longer and notice what happens to your hips. So maybe there might be a little bit more of an obvious kind of like dance between you and your edge in half shoelace here, because it is quite strong and it can sometimes be intense on the hips, the back of the leg. So maybe you might kind of like come to your edge and then it might become a little bit much and you might need to back off. And then you might come forwards again, or you might suddenly find that you get a real release where you can come forwards and just drop forwards. So let's just take another 3 full breaths here. Last breath. And then coming up, leave your legs as they are though. So we're going to come, before we come out of this with the legs, we're going to come into a rotation. So taking your right hand over towards your bent leg. Just take the fingers on your left hand behind you, tent the fingers, and look over your left shoulder. Relax the shoulders. So just turning the chest to the side here. Keep lifted through the crown of your head. We're not going to be too long here. It will be just about 5 breaths. And just to open up through the front of the body, lengthening through your spine. And just for the last couple of breaths, let's bring the head back to the center and then look in the opposite direction. So looking over your right shoulder now. And then slowly, slowly, slowly come back to the center. De-rotate. And this is going to feel, you're going to feel like an old person when you come out of this. So lean back first. Release your bent leg. Oh, slowly does it. Maybe hop off whatever you're sitting on. And whatever feels nice. So personally, I like to go for the old internal again and just sit there for a moment. You might like to stay still. You might be craving some movement. So whatever feels the best for you. And you know, hopefully sort of getting that sensation where things return back to normal pretty quick. So rather like you take your heart rate after doing some kind of like strenuous exercise, you'd expect your heart rate to be quite elevated when you first stop. But, you know, the sign of being kind of like fit and healthy is that recovery rate of your heart. So how quickly your heart rate just starts to drop and recover is an indicator of fitness. And it's pretty similar with this really. So how quickly the sensations of stretch ease off is a good guide. And maybe if it's still feeling strong, then maybe next time that's a cue to just dial it back a little bit. So coming back onto your seat, coming onto the edge, and this time with the left leg straight out, we're going to hug the right leg in. So give it a good hug in so that you can get a sensation of lift in the spine. That's what we want to try and keep. And then pick your bent leg up, cross it over. Appreciate before you go any further that this side could be quite different. And then just bring your foot back towards your hip. Trying as best you can, roughly, to get knee above knee. It doesn't matter how high the knee is. So if your knee is really up high, and there's no way it's going to drop down any further, that's fine. You can put a cushion in between your knee and the lower knee if that feels like you need some support. So again, same starting place, hands either side, lift first and then start to come forwards. So you might find, again, everybody's different. You might find that you only need to go here and you're feeling it. You're feeling it in the outside hip. You're feeling it down the back of the leg. It's quite half shoelace. Is a valid pose in its own right. It's often offered as a modification for full shoelace, but in its own shape, it has value in that it stretches the back of your underneath leg. So again, externally rotating your right hip and flexing at your left hip. So, you know, it's probably going to feel, because of the position of your bent leg, your mind thinks that you're internally rotating your hip, but you're really not. So if I had a skeleton, I'd be able to show you, because it comes from your lower leg. So your lower leg, the knee joint, physically, it only has two planes of movement, your knee. It can go forwards and it can go back. It flexes and it extends. It doesn't, your knee joint never rotates. So by what we're doing, by bringing the foot back, we are not we're not rotating the knee, we're actually externally rotating your hip. So the knee has just flexed here to be able to bend it back. And it's the hip externally rotating that's making that possible. So, sorry if that's a little bit anatomy nerdy, but I am an anatomy nerd. That's, I think sometimes it's good to understand how our bodies work, how they work mechanically, and any understanding of how our bodies move can only help us to look after them and protect them a little bit better. So just in this last minute here, let's just invite a little bit more softness into your shape. And then slowly, let's come up. Leave the legs as they are. Sit as tall as you can. So maybe tent the fingers beside you to lengthen up through the spine. And then take your left hand over towards your right leg. Tent your fingers on your right hand and just guide yourself around to look over your right shoulder. And in the last couple of breaths, turn your head back to face the front and look your head to the left. And then derotate, come back to the center, lean back. Oh, derotate. Straighten out the legs. Come off your seat. It might be nice to just leave the legs here. It might be nice to just move the legs subtly. It might be nice to bend the legs and internally rotate or move. Good. All right, and then from here. So let's come over onto hands and knees. And taking your cushions or your pillows or your bolster, whatever you have, and maybe getting an extra cushion or a blanket so that you can have something under your knee. So we've done 2 lots of external rotation of the hip and we've flexed. So we're going to do a little bit of hip extension now. So pad underneath your left knee you're coming into dragon. So padding underneath your left knee generously. So the last thing that you want is to be uncomfortable in your knee by a hard floor. So put something soft under your knee and then step forwards with your right leg. Your pillows or your cushions or your bolster, you're going to wedge whatever you've got, wedge it into your left thigh so that you're really supported here. So really supported underneath your left thigh. So that's kind of like the brake to stop your thigh from going all the way to the floor and going into kind of like the splits. And then taking your hands up onto your right thigh. So we're going to do upright dragon here. So just be nice and even with your weight between your right foot and your left shin, and then allow your left hip to sink forwards. And just relax into your shoulders. So we're going to start upright here. So really feeling, you know, when you first get into this, it's kind of like this tensing of the body where it thinks your body sends a message to your brain to think, oh, my hips are tight, it's going to hurt. So everything, you stay upright. But then gradually, with the aid of deep breaths, your brain tells your body, it's okay, we're on the same side, I'm not going to hurt you, I've got you. So maybe the body starts to let go a little bit, and you might find that you start to sink into your support underneath your left thigh. It is quite strong. Well, for me, it's very strong on this side. So in my left hip, it's really strong, the front of the hip. So it's getting into that deep, complex psoas muscle. So it's kind of, that is the muscle that kind of connects our upper body to our lower body. And it's really, you know, it attaches around the ribs and on the side of the spine, and then crosses over the front and the side of the hip onto our thigh bone. So it's kind of like what keeps upper and lower connected. And we hold a lot of tension here. So it is, you know, if you're feeling any times where you might be feeling fearful or traumatized, our natural response is to draw our knees into our chest. And that makes for tight hips, as does sitting and driving and running and cycling. So a lot of activity or not enough activity impacts on your the quality of your hip flexor, your psoas muscle. So we've been here for a little while, so maybe things will start to ease off for you. Maybe you might like to bring your hands down inside your right foot. You can move the foot out of the way a little bit, and you can come down a little bit lower here. That immediately changes things. So for me, now I'm feeling this more in the front thigh. So I'm feeling this more in my front leg here. If you don't like being down, you can come back up. But if you want something a little bit more stronger here, you can bend your left leg and reach and take hold of your left foot with your right hand, and then bring yourself around into a rotation. That's going to significantly change everything in the front of your left thigh though. So if you're doing that, one of my classes, I have like a few runners come along to, and I've got one lady who does insanely long distance trail runs, you know, like really, really long length trail runs. And she loves this because our quads are tight. Personally, I kind of like, I'm on the fence with this. I like it, but it does sometimes make me want to weep. Laura's nodding her head. Don't be surprised. I'll talk a little bit more on the second side. Don't be surprised if this makes you feel a little bit irritable as well right now. Last couple of breaths. If you're holding your foot, which I don't think any of you are, flex your foot a little bit so that it doesn't go ping, so you can carefully let it go. If you're down on the floor, come up. If your hands are on your leg, put your hands on your cushions or your bolsters and then just straighten your front leg and fold over your front leg. So a little kind of like mini half Hanumanasana, half splits here. Good. Alrighty, let's do the other side, shall we? So let's start clean slate. You know, whatever it was like on the first side doesn't mean anything. It might be all different on this side. So pad underneath your right knee. Pad underneath right knee. Step over with your left leg. Wedge your soft furnishings into the front of your right thigh. And then lean forwards. Leaning in. Hands on the thigh. Sink the hips, let gravity do its thing. This is a lot less tight for me on this side. But wedge in so that that bolster has you. You know, it's physically impossible for you to go any further because the bolster or the cushions or the pillows are blocking your progress. Lift up, relax your shoulders. Steady breath. So meridian-wise, what we can do here is we can connect with a fair few meridians here actually. So bring your attention to your left big toe and push down with your left big toe. So let's connect with your liver meridian here, which starts on the inside edge of your big toenail. And it runs up the inside of your big toe. And then it loops over the top of the foot and then around the inside of the foot, inside of the ankle bone, and it tracks up the inside seam of your leg all the way up to the groin where it travels into the body and then moves up your abdomen cavity and into your liver. Branches is same on both legs and then both ends and just underneath your ribs here. So that's that. And then on the extended leg, we think of the front of the foot. And we're thinking about now the stomach meridian, which runs up the inside of your leg, and the outside of your leg. It goes up the outside edge of your leg as far as your knee, and then it comes over to the front of the thigh, over the front of the hip. So that's where we are opening out here, over the front of the hip, and then it comes up, goes into the body, into the abdomen, the stomach, up through the diaphragm and the neck, and into your face and ends just on your cheekbone below your eyes here. And although we are in liver time in the spring here, so front leg is liver, and balancing all that kind of like forward thinking energy, planning energy, that real active energy with the meridian in the back leg, which is kind of like more akin to a different time of the year, but really focuses on helping to build a strong and healthy immune system. So if you want to bring your hands inside your left foot, you can. So hands can come down. Maybe you make more space in your hips here, or maybe you can stay up. And maybe you can tuck your right toe if you want a little bit more in the front of the thigh, and then bend the foot towards the bottom and hold your right foot with your left leg Turning the body over to the left now, just for the final minute. So I mentioned liver energy. So the emotional quality that's often paired with liver and the spring is anger and frustration, which has its rightful place in certain situations. So balanced liver energy, you'd show appropriate levels of anger. So things like anger at things like injustice, or if you see somebody's been treated badly, you might be angry at that. However, out of balance, you might be angry at just angry at life. You know, we've all come across those people that just seem angry permanently. I was thinking Kenny Everett. Those of you that are old enough to remember Kenny Everett, Angry of Mayfair. He'd go off on like one of his angry rants over the slightest little things, which used to make me laugh. So the last couple of breaths here. And then slowly, carefully coming back. Straightening your left leg, bring your hands down onto your pillows, cushions, or whatever. Straighten your leg. And that should feel really nice coming out of here. And then we're going to step the leg back. So we've externally rotated, we've extended the hip, we've flexed the hip. So before we come any further, we're going to come into squat now. So come down, take the feet wide, a little bit of movement, pad under your heels. So if you don't quite meet the floor with your heels, put something under your heels. You can sit on something as well. So you can grab your bolster or your cushions and just sit here. And just spreading the legs apart, so be comfortable. We're going to be a couple of minutes, so we're not going to be a massive, huge length of time here. 2 minutes, just 2 minutes here. So take the support if you need it. Drop your hips, you can let your back round. So we're not striving for any particular straightness in your back. We're not trying to lift the crown of the head up towards the ceiling. You can let the head be heavy. You can even rest your head onto your hands here. And again, this is the one of the places where the job of your breath is going to be really sending that message of safety to your hips. One more minute here. If that fills you with dread, sit on something, prop under your hips. Last 3 breaths. And then place your hands down, slowly start to straighten your legs up behind you. Place the hands down on the floor, let your head be heavy. So if your hands don't quite meet the floor, have your hands on something. So we want to take any strain out of the back of the neck or the shoulders here. We just want to let gravity allow the back to stretch here. So just stretching down either side of the spine, down the backs of your legs. You might even, if this feels really you know, uncomfortable for you to just be in space here. You might like to stand against a wall. So it's quite nice to stand against a wall so that you feel supported. You have something behind you to keep that support in the back of the body. Draw your chin towards your chest. Again, you can let your hands rest on something if they don't quite meet the floor. Again, not too long here, so just 1 more minute. We're now flexing at the hips. So we've gone from external rotation to hip flexion. Can you, with each breath, draw your belly in and find a little bit of space, maybe? So not quite going for Ujjayi breath, where we would really be actively drawing the belly in on the exhale, sort of like getting that kind of like, almost like a pumping action to assist with the exhale, but just, you know, really softly drawing the belly to see whether there's any space to be gained. And then slowly start to bend your legs, and we're just going to come back down into our final squat just for 5 breaths. Maybe this feels different this time around, so maybe that we've kind of made some space in the back of the body and our hips are really open now. Maybe this feels a little bit more accessible, maybe not. Sit on something. Last 2 breaths. Maybe taking a contemplation back onto our mandala. Life is beautiful. Life is beautiful when you have open hips. And then slowly from here, let's come forwards and then just come onto your hands and knees, however you feel you're able to get there. And then maybe it might be nice to just sit back onto your heels just for a brief moment. So by sitting onto your heels in hero's pose, it's a natural internal rotation of your hips here. So you're not going to be here for long. So those people that hate this, don't panic. We're not going to sit here for 5 minutes. So what we are going to do is we're going to get set up for our next shape, which is another rotation. It's a nice stretch for the inside thighs here. So we're going to come into frog. So you're going to need your soft furnishings, whatever shape they might take, in front of you. Then we're going to lean onto the bolster. And you might want to come sideways onto your mat. So I'm just going to show you from here. So it's definitely nice to have the knees on something non-slippery. And then take your knees as wide apart as you feel comfortable to do so. Now your feet are going to go one of 2 ways. So your feet might be like mine. Let's actually turn around. It probably won't be a very elegant position, but at least you'll see my feet. Your feet might go like flippers here. Or if that feels hideous for your ankles, you might like to turn the feet in. Don't stress about what your ankles are doing, because we only care about this bit of the leg and the hip. We don't really care about what's happening below the knee. The most important thing to consider is that your knees feel comfortable. So it might mean taking a couple of cushions off the sofa to just put underneath your knees. So maybe getting a couple of cushions underneath your knees so that you're padded here. Actually, that's really nice. Turn your toes in, turn your toes out, have something to catch you and then relax down. So you're like a little frog, resting down here. Let's have a little look at how we're getting on. Good, so filling any spaces where you feel vulnerable, really. So where you feel unsupported, where you feel like, oh, you know, I'm going to slip. Just fill the spaces so that you feel supported. So this is a really nice stretch on the inside thigh and the groin. So really targeting all 3 yin meridians of your leg, of the lower body. So there's kidney, liver and spleen. So kidney for grounding, healthy movement of water. Liver for feelings of compassion and kind of forward thinking, clear vision, appropriate anger. And spleen for your immune system. So again, spleen to help manage your immune system, help to, you know, really feel like that feeling of care and compassion to yourself and others appropriately. And you might, actually, this is one where things definitely do soften off. So maybe, or they may not. So you might find that you can take your legs a little bit wider. Or you might find that you need to bring your legs back in closer. It does definitely open up though. Maybe if it's not opening up for you, perhaps you might have gone off a little enthusiastically. So always a sign. If things open up, then that's great. So not to go too fast. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So in a regular yoga class, we'd be typically holding postures for at best 5 breaths. And I know that a teacher's 5 breaths sometimes feels a lot longer than a normal person's 5 breaths, but 5 breaths is not 3 or 5 minutes. So we generally don't hold these shapes for very long in a vinyasa yoga class. We'd stay there for a bit and then we'd move on. But now we're really just tapping into that deeper level of connective tissue, maybe a deeper level of being connected in your mind. So last 3 or 4 breaths here. And then slowly come up. So the best way out of this is to bring your body up first. So bring your body up, then you can bring one leg in and then the other. Do it slowly. Maybe take a moment to sit back on your heels. Okay. And then our last shape, which you're going to do on each side, now is the time for internal rotation. So coming down to lie on your back, have your props close by. So let's come down to lie on your back and cross your right leg over your left. So close cross of the legs. Now we're internally rotating. And then hug both legs into the chest. Maybe just for a moment, hold either your right leg, or one hand on the right leg and one hand on the left shin, and draw the legs into the body. And then we're going to come into a twist with our legs crossed. So it might be that you just keep your legs crossed, or it might be that you can curl your right foot around your left calf, open your arms, move that out of the way, and then slowly bring your legs over to the left for twisted roots. Prop underneath your knees, prop underneath your bent legs if you need to. Prop underneath your right shoulder if you need to. By turning your head to look down the opposite arm, it's going to help to open the chest and soften into your shoulder. So this is strong down the outside of the body here. So a strong stretch down the outside, the IT band. Strong internal rotation of your hip. So I'm going to come up so I can see you. And again, it may or may not happen that you have your right calf tucked around or your right foot tucked around your left calf. Or it might not be at all possible. But just keep your legs crossed and focus on sending those calming thoughts into your top hip, into opening out your ribs. So allowing that stretch to open out the ribs. The last minute here. Just releasing your jaw. Letting go of any muscular effort in your body. Last couple of breaths. And then slowly turn your head back to the center. Uncross your legs as you bring both legs back into the center. A little hug in, maybe just take the legs straight up towards the ceiling. Might be nice to take the legs straight up. And then hug the legs back in. This time cross your left leg over your right. Hug the knees back into the chest, either holding left shin or one of each. And then maybe taking your left foot around your right calf, and then slowly drop both legs over to your right. Twisted roots. So in terms of meridian, this is strong gallbladder all the way. So really getting into the outside seam of your body here, outside seam. In particular, it's targeting your the fascia, so your IT band, which actually is a piece of connective tissue that starts on the crest of the hip and then runs down the outside of the leg over the knee, side of the knee, and then connects at just below the knee here. So it's connective tissue, it's not muscle, it's not ligament, it is a piece of fascia, which when your muscles get tight, this tightens up. It can tighten up and affect how your hips move, and it also can affect how your knees behave as well. So it's really hard to stretch. So doing things like this is a good way of stretching it. The banana shape is a good way of stretching it. And if you like to really suffer, you can go up and down a foam roller, which really, it does get into the fascia, helps to kind of like break down any knots, just smooth it out a little bit, but it isn't very pleasant. This is a much more pleasant way of stretching this fascia, I think, anyway. So last minute here. And then taking a deep breath in to turn your head back to center. As you bring your legs back into central position, uncross your legs. Either hug the legs in or straighten them up briefly. And then when you feel ready, now you can get yourself set up for Shavasana, our final resting position. However that looks for you. So it might be lying flat, it might be lying with something supporting you under your knees, it might be legs up the wall, legs up the chair, legs up the sofa. Whatever feels like it's going to be a nice, comfortable and supported position for you, just to let go. And then lying back, make yourself warm. Close your eyes, cover your eyes if that feels like something that's going to be useful, helpful, nice. Otherwise, close your eyes and let your breath settle. So as you continue to rest here, noticing any sensations in your hips now, whether they feel more spacious, so just reading this small piece here about the possibility of space and maybe perception of emptiness. So often when we think of something as being empty, we think of it as being deficient or lacking. A petrol tank on empty is bad news. People who speak carelessly or break promise often speak with empty words. An empty seat at a table means that somebody we were expecting hasn't appeared. But yet in Taoist and Buddhist concepts, emptiness is seen as the opposite. In Taoism, emptiness is the space of potential. For example, a cup needs to be empty so that you can fill it with warm tea. As the Tao Te Ching observes, we join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the centre hole that makes the wagon move. We hammer wood for a house, but it's the inner space that makes it livable. In Buddhism, emptiness or sunyata is a state where our scattered and confused mind sees past duality into the reality that, in the words of teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, is the one is the all, and the all is the one. When you can see emptiness not as a negative concept, but as what helps you see potential and the oneness of all experience, it will help you shift the way you approach any object, any person or experience. Rather than narrowing your perception, this view of emptiness can help you feel qualities of immeasurable and boundless possibilities. Changing the idea of emptiness. Bringing some movements back into your body now. Taking some deep breaths. And then maybe taking a stretch, drawing your knees in towards your body, rolling onto your left side. And then with your eyes closed, carefully bring yourself back up to sitting, however sitting feels or looks for you. Just rest your hands down into your lap with your elbows close to your body. Relax your shoulders and lift through the crown of your head. And let's just come back to our mandala card that we picked at the beginning of the class. And those affirmations, maybe your own affirmation before I pick the card. Maybe there are some parallels between the card pick. The affirmations. My life is beautiful right now. I see beauty all around me. My life is overflowing with joyful experiences. However small they may seem, they are there. Let's close our practice by taking a deep breath in through your nose. And then just let your breath go out of your mouth without effort. Draw your chin in towards your chest. Open your eyes. And thank you very much for a lovely practice. Here's the